Today we're doing part 1 of the official Jello Impact Pre-Natlan Power Rankings tier list. These are the assumptions we're going to be making, and I'll explain them more as we go. Remember that the reason I do tier lists is because I think they're fun. Just because a character is low does not mean I don't like them, or that you shouldn't use them. And as with any tier list, they are completely subjective. So although I try and check my biases at the door for this video more than any others, at the end of the day, it is my opinion. Let's get started. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Starting off with basically the greatest disappointment possibly in the entire game, it's Hydro Traveller. Despite Hydro being an insane element, Hoyoverse sort of forgot that you actually have to be able to apply some of that element to be good. And they forgot that if you're going to have an on-field DPS, you kind of have to be able to move around so you're not constantly being taken to the cleaners by the enemies. And furthermore, they forgot that an on-field DPS needs to actually do damage. And they forgot that if you're going to have an off-field skill, or burst in this case, that it actually needs to be able to hit the enemies to function. So yeah, Hydro Traveller goes in the very back. Next is going to be Aloy. I never played Aloy properly until pretty recently, and it was kind of fun. Freminet actually allows her to get a more consistent cryo infusion. Aloy's bombs need to explode for her to get her cryo normal attack infusion for her to be cryo Yoimiya. And Freenet's pets can actually detonate the bombs, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's still kind of inconsistent. Against the right enemies, Aloy can be functional and be about as good as Kaya or Rosaria, but in other situations, she's just much worse. She can be sort of just an energy battery. In the days of when you could just defeat the Abyss by your Ayaka carrying you, she was like a decent cryo battery for Ayaka, but nowadays that Ayaka really needs actually properly good supports to make her teams good. And so although Aloy has gotten better, other characters have gotten more better. Amber is also a character that has sort of just been power crept out by other supports. She used to have a bit of a niche for Hu Tao VV Vape setups, where her burst applies a lot of pyro, and if she had Elegy of the End and the Instructor's Artifact set, she could be a decent pyro applier and buffer, allowing you to get easy swirls. And since Hu Tao doesn't need Bennett too much, sometimes the Elemental Mastery from Elegy and the Instructor's buff could be better than the attack buff from Bennett, and considering you don't have to be in Bennett's circle, etc, etc. So this is still something you can do. Unfortunately, Hu Tao has gotten a lot of new teams with Freminet and Xinyan, and Double Hydro is still really good. And you sort of just want to play Bennett if you do want to do a VV Vape setup, especially since Bennett can now hold the Key of Kajna Suit. So even if you compare Elegy Amber, there's still an option Bennett has to be better. Amber is pretty sad as a main DPS, both clunky and not strong. I haven't built her as a main DPS yet, but there are some pretty creative and cool clears where you use Melt Amber with some Chongyun stuff, and it's pretty awesome. One day I'll do that. Right now I'm pretty stretched thin, just trying to build all the characters. One day I'll build a DPS Amber and I'll test that out, but at the moment it's just not that good. Next is going to be Kaveh. His only sort of good team is with Nilou, and running him on field means you're not running a Hydro character on field, and you don't have flexibility with rotations to do that, which means that your off-field character has to be something like Xingqiu to actually provide some off-field Hydro application. But if you do that, then your other characters are very susceptible to taking bloom damage, and makes the team very hard to play. On top of that, the team is a major downgrade, or at least it's a downgrade to other teams. The only niche Kaveh has is he can break some cryo shields because he's a claymore, but I don't think this is very useful, as claymores, like if he could break really tough cryo shields like cryo heralds, then I would say that's pretty cool. He deserves a higher spot, but really the only shields that you can break in a decent amount of time are going to be like Abyss Mages, which I don't know, that's just not a popular enough enemy to brick your Nilou to be warranting like an actual consideration for being a pro for him, in my opinion. He can also be really cope Alhaitham, or like a really cope Nilou, or use him not in a Nilou team. But both of these teams are really bad, at least for me. Maybe when I get a higher constellation. Right now I don't have C6. I did wish for him to try and get C6, but I don't want to risk my 5-star pity, and I got all the way to pity. Maybe it's a little better, but to be honest, I'm already feeling generous putting him up here. He feels like one of the worst characters characters in the game to use, in that he's Dendro, but having to be an on-fielder with low scaling and low power just makes him almost always a bad choice. So unfortunately, Kaveh goes here. Next is going to be Electro Traveller. Electro Traveller can do a thing, and I think this is realistically the only thing that they can do, is either be like a really cope Hyper Bloom trigger or be a Burgeon / Hyper Bloom trigger, which is basically the same thing that Razor does, and that you put them in Bennett's circle with C6 along with Xingqiu and Nahida, so you can create blooms and then detonate the blooms with either your Pyro Infused Sword or your Electricity and build them full EM to do reaction damage that way. It works, I guess, but it's worse than Razor from the lower range, and using up all of those amazing units to build this really, really mediocre team, it's really not very good. But it's at least something, and you can do aggravate, I guess. Next is going to be Geo Traveller. Provides a small crit rate buff, provides a little bit of damage, provides a Geo construct, and more importantly, Geo application to be used as the second Geo on Navia teams. They're all right. What holds them back is their contribution level isn't very high for a Navia team. It's really Navia carrying the team. Like, sure, they provide some Crystallize, they provide some off-field Geo, nice, but the team is just hard carried by the rest of the team. Geo Traveller is not a big contributor, and the team definitely still feels noticeably worse than Zhongli, Chiori, Albedo, especially Zhongli and Chiori. Next is going to be Ningguang. I actually recently 90'd my Ningguang and leveled her up a bunch more and tested her a bunch more just to make sure that I was putting her in the best place possible. And although I really want to put her higher, I just can't justify it. She's definitely fine with as a pair to Navia for bossing as like a pretty alright sub DPS, basically the same use case as the Geo Traveller, and her Jade Screen can provide a little Geo damage bonus for Navia, but on the whole it's just not enough damage and just not enough team contribution to pull her any higher. I tried her on my Freminet Bennett Shangling core, same thing I did with Aloy, that was Aloy's best team as well, and it's just not quite good enough. Just not quite good enough to really recommend building. So I would say that now looking at tier 4 and tier 5, these are the tiers where it's sort of like I would caution against building. You're sort of, it's not that it's not worth it to build these characters if you like them, but it's sort of like they'll probably hold you back a decent bit, and they're gonna have to be carried by really good teams as opposed to adding to the power of your team. They'll generally be taking away power to your team. So that's these two tiers. Actually, I think I'm gonna put Razor in this tier as well. Yeah, back when all the abysses were catered towards Nilou and enemies were grouped up nice and close and Burgeon was really good, Razor was pretty darn cool, and it was a pretty great team, the Razor Burgeon. But nowadays, I kind of just wouldn't recommend anyone build that team. You can build Aggravate as well. The one thing I do want to try once I have more resources is Rainbow Razor, where you build them with Farina and you do both physical and electro damage. You give them some sort of attack goblet or something. I really want some sort of support that could buff both physical and electro and cryo damage on a team. I think that support will come out like a superconduct support. And so I really think that Razor has some possibility to get better, but right now, similar to these other characters, it just really holds you back. I think having to play Burgeon in Circle Impact is really bad, and using Nahida and Bennett for your Burgeon, especially when he's not even utilizing Bennett, is just for the power infusion. It's just not it. Moving on to tier 3, it's gonna be Anemo Traveller. Anemo Traveller has VV as well as a further 20% res shred for the element that they swirl. So they do something. But when we've got the likes of Sucrose that can do VV and share a lot of EM, or Kazuo, of course, or any of these other characters, Lynette, which is generally just a better kit, there's no real reason to build your Anemo MC. However, they still at least do something, so they go there, as opposed to the lower Travelers, which really hold you back. This at least has some sort of utility, but yeah, you should never use them instead of Kazuo or Sucrose or something. Next is Yunjin. I think that this is always a controversial take, but I really don't think Yunjin is very good. Her best teams are either Ayato or Wanderer, but you're really never going to be using Ayato in single target, which is the only time that Yunjin's buff is actually impactful. In AoE, the stacks that she provides just to get used up like that and basically don't contribute very much. And Ayato's scalings are just not high enough to really justify hyper buffing him, you can do a Wanderer. Like, okay, if Yunjin made a Geo construct, Wanderer with Yunjin and Chiori would actually be sick. But unfortunately, Yunjin does not provide a Geo construct. So if you have C1 Chiori, that could be okay. But that's, you know, we're not going to go with assuming you have C1 Chiori just to make Yunjin better. Basically, she's just been really power crept by other supports. The buff that she gives is not big enough and it's too specific. Not to mention she takes a bajillion resources to get going. You have to level 90 her, level her talents, get her really good artifacts. She has huge ER, difficulties hitting her thresholds, and at the end of the day, her buff is still smaller than most of the other good buffers in the game that you would play. Her biggest synergy is with Yoimiya, but unfortunately Yoimiya is not that great of a character in terms of power, and on top of that, even Yoimiya has better options now with the release of Freminet. So overall, Yunjin unfortunately goes here. Also, even at C6, which I do have C6 Yunjin, I have her level 90, I have level 9 burst, 8 or 9, and then I have really quite good full husk set for her that gives her a lot of defense, and it's still just a side grade to Bennett, and the attack speed isn't that crazy. And again, if Yoimiya was a better character, if Yoimiya was one of the better DPSs instead of one of the worst DPSs, I would bump her up a tier for sure, because she actually has good synergy with Yoimiya and is one of Yoimiya's better and more comfy teams. Also, if she made a Geo construct, I would definitely bump her up a tier, because it would be a really cool core to use her with Chiori, and that would actually be pretty good. But as is, unfortunately, here she goes. Next is going to be Xinyan. I know it's kind of weird having Xinyan this high, but the main reason is because she's a Claymore, and so you can use her in a plunge team with Shenhe. That's the main reason why she's this high. And I know it's weird to put her so high just for that, but basically that's all. Like, you're going to see how high Diluc goes, and I think for good reason, because Diluc is like actually a pretty good carry in Shenhe teams. And Xinyan just isn't like that much worse. Like, she's obviously worse because she doesn't have the crazy scalings, the extra scalings that Diluc has, but still decent. And you're usually running a plunge team with Freminet, so her physical damage stuff will still at least do something. You can also run like a weird hybrid team with Freminet, Eula. I can't remember what the whole team was, but she would be doing, yeah, unfortunately Eula's also pretty bad, and she's not one of the best supports for Eula. But yeah, basically it's her weapon type that carries her here. I'll be putting on some little symbols at the end to denote that certain characters require certain other characters, or there's a reason that they're high or low, or that they require a constellation, or they require a 5-star weapon or something like that. So stick around to the end to see that. Yeah, I get if you think that's not fair, but that's what I think. Next is going to be Qiqi. Despite having the Cloran team, the Cloran team isn't that good. Like, there's a lot of better things that you can put on that Cloran team, and Skyward Blade just doesn't do enough to really give the physical damage that you'd want to justify the super conduct. Nevertheless, Qiqi's still a fine healer for Freminet teams, and can still be used on field, off field. Like, Qiqi is basically fine now because of Freminet. Still not good, but fine. Cryo is just a really not good element, and she doesn't apply that much cryo, and she doesn't apply any buffs or any energy, or have she has huge energy problems. Her skill cooldown is really awful, but she's a good healer, and Freminet benefits a lot from good healers, so still all right, but basically worse than every other healer. I think this is the lowest healer on the game, so that makes sense. Next is going to be Freminet. Physical really needs a buff. And I've said it before, but physical, I have my ideas for a super conduct support. I already described it. I think that they're going to get it, and I think it's going to move Freminet up, but right now the damage is just not there, and the DPS check for the Abyss is going up, and just running a Hyperbloom team with an on-field Freminet feels kind of bad compared to running actually good Hyperbloom teams. So, unfortunately, I do not have I do have C6 Freminet, right? Yeah, I do, and I recently tested him, and the damage just isn't there, really. I think with some superconduct buffs, he could be pretty good. Right now, this is the best I got. And very similar is going to be Eula. I really wish that plunging could build stacks for Eula's ultimate. That would have been so awesome, because you could have been plunging, doing actual damage, and then explode your burst at the end. Oh, that would have been so good. She would have been so saved, but no, her plunging completely wastes her stack mechanic, and that's really sad. It's really sad. I think all three of these characters, their best team is probably Bennett Plunge, which is just not a good sign for your overall DPS. Again, I think a Superconic buffer could actually save these characters. Eula has some other gameplay problems with the backloaded damage and stuff like that, but generally the damage is still pretty good, and if she just did a lot more damage, you could work around the backload, and she is super fun to play. I like the playstyle. I hope she gets buffed in the future, but that's where I think she goes for now. And yes, that makes her the worst limited 5-star in my opinion, but there's another character she doesn't beat out by all that much, and that is Albedo. Now, the Albedo stands, if you really want to be pedantic, you could probably justify moving him here, and I kind of feel like I should. Should we be nice to Albedo? We'll be nice to Albedo. So at C0, Albedo has a decent niche in that he's pretty good in Chiori teams. The problem is his construct gets destroyed really easily, and that's like the main problem, on top of him just being completely worse than Chiori in every way. He does less damage than C0 Chiori, even on Navia teams, and he does less damage, way less damage than C1 Navia, or way less damage than Chiori in Ito teams. So there's really never ever a reason to get Albedo. So like, if I was ranking pull value, then I'd want to put him lower, but talking strictly power ranking, I think this makes more sense. But outside of Navia teams, it really is like a sad time. Hopefully he can get buffed in the future. At the bottom of tier 2 is going to be Mika. Mika has some decent stuff. Mika is a pretty good healer for Freminet teams. He provides some attack speed for characters like Wanderer. Wanderer is probably his best team. He's obviously best in slot for Eula and Freminet, but his use in like Wanderer teams and other Freminet teams put him at the bottom of tier 2 instead of being in tier 3 with them. The things that I don't like about his kit is mostly his lack of cryo application is big, because normally I like using Charlotte Farina in particular when freeze is good, because freezing the enemies, getting some more crowd control can be pretty nice, but Mika's cryo application is actually awful. And outside of Wanderer, the attack speed does nothing. And if you build your Charlotte properly, you can have Thrilling Tales on Charlotte, which Mika can't do. Best he can do is some Fav Lance. So still pretty all right, but nothing crazy for Mika. Next is Heizou. Heizou is like kind of bad Zhao, or bad Wanderer, bad Sucrose. I was kind of excited for like a plunge Heizou, but I didn't really like that much either. If you get your hands on C6 though, like he's not that bad damage wise. And even without C6, like he can still be bad Sucrose and swirl, do a tiny bit of grouping, pass Thrilling Tales, aggravate carry with Beto. I think that's probably his best team, is using him as an aggravate carry, where you'll use Fischl and Beto off and then a Dendro character off field. So by nature of being Anemo, he's like got some stuff, and you can build him to do some pretty cool nuke damage. One day, you know, I'll crown his skill. I'll get C6, crown his skill, or whatever, but he's not like on any banners. Like I haven't seen him in forever, so I haven't had a chance to get a higher constellation of him, but still, from what I've seen of how much his constellations increase his value, this is where I think he goes. And right beside him is Anemo Lynette. I like Lynette a bit better because although she can be sort of an on-field aggravate carry at C6, which is pretty decent, Lynette is also like a decent sub DPS for Zhao or Wanderer teams when you're using Faruzan. And that is what gives her like a tiny bit more value in my opinion. The damage isn't that high, so still like more often than not you'll want to do other off-field DPSs instead of her, but still she does some decent damage. And also she provides a taunt, so especially for someone like Wanderer, it can be a little bit more comfortable than using some other sub DPSs, because the taunt is kind of nice, but it's not strong enough to get her any higher than this. Next is going to be Diona. This is definitely the highest I've ever placed Diona, and the main reason is because she actually has like a team now with Melt Gaming. Melt Gaming is very inconsistent in that it only works against certain types of enemies because it's very circle impact. But it does hella damage if it's set up right. And Diona has a bit of other stuff here and there, providing some heals, some shields, some EM buffing. It's kind of weird to buff EM. I just could see her getting maybe a little bit better in the future if we get more cryo. If we get a cryo character who wants energy, who wants to melt, you know, I could see her doing some stuff. But for right now, it's kind of decent. Bottom of tier 2 makes sense to me. Next is going to be Barbara. Barbara's best use is definitely still on Nilou teams, but she has a secondary use for Freminet teams as like an alternative to Kokomi. Obviously, she doesn't really deal damage herself. Barbara doesn't. It's just going to be Ocean U clan damage, but Still a decent healer, can still be like an on-fielder for mono hydro or like a mix of on-fielder, off-fielder. But on Nilou, she's both your healer and hydro applicator, also a budget Kokomi, and she is decent at these things. She's not that bad. I don't really recommend her for Hyper Bloom. It's basically either Freminet or Nilou, but hey, those are pretty good teams, and she does like hold them back a little bit like versus other options, but they're still not bad, and she still does contribute. So yeah, bottom of tier 2. Next is gonna be Rosaria. Thank goodness that Bennett's Xiangling Farina is such a strong core, and Cryo is actually good in this core. This is kind of what saves Cryo for me right now. It's like the new Reverse Melt. Reverse Melt used to be double Cryo Bennett Xiangling, but now you just remove the second Cryo and put in Farina. Farina can buff Xiangling and the Cryo character. And this is a team that's really quite strong. Like, you can easily 36-star the Abyss with this team. It's very much not Rosaria that's doing the heavy lifting, but Rosaria is still doing good damage. She's still doing some melts here and there. It's a very flexible team. I like it, and I know you're wondering where are Kaya and Chongyun, and both of them go in all the same place. They all have basically the exact same use, which is this team. Chongyun has some plunge stuff you can do, which is pretty cool. I kind of want to actually put him ahead of these guys for the plunge stuff he can do. So Kaya and Chongyun, I think both belong in tier 2 as well. And I think Cryo will get a resurgence, whether it's in Natlan, which I could definitely see, or in Shenhe Nahida, which it'll definitely, if not in Natlan, it'll definitely get a resurgence in Shenhe Nahida. But Freeze is sort of dead, Mono Cryo is sort of cope, and it's just better just to use Farina, Bennett, Xiangling for all three of these characters, and it's pretty good. If you haven't tried it out, give it a try. I made an entire video at it. Maybe I'll link it at the end. Next is going to be Yoimiya. I have physical pain putting Yoimiya here, and to be honest, I'm going to move Yoimiya, oh my god, below these below the Cryos. You guys, I want you to know, I love Yoimiya so much. I love her voice, I love her animations, I love her playstyle, but the fact that she's so single target locked and the damage difference, the scaling difference between her and Hu Tao and other DPSs really starts to show when you have buffers like Farina giga buffing the character and really accentuating the raw damage potential of these characters. I don't know. I'm still going to put Yoimiya here because I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt because I don't have her 5-star weapon. I'm going to be getting her 5-star weapon next time she reruns, and I'm going to be farming. Well, she uses Mario Shisei Hunter now, but if there's a new best team that uses Shimenawa, I'm gonna go back to farming Shimenawa. I will max Yoimiya. My Yoimiya is crowned. It's 1099. But the fact that she's just so single target locked and the Abyss checks have become so heavy on the AoE side of things that there's just a lot of instances where she can't even 36-star the Abyss in 3 chambers of the Abyss. Like, and that's just really sad to say. And that's why I kind of want to put her down here. But again, I love her so much. Maybe she doesn't even belong in this tier. Maybe she should go a tier below, but I can't do that to her just yet. I gotta get her 5-star weapon. Note, this one is rating pending. Most characters, by the way, I test a mix of 4 and 5-star weapons. So I test the characters both with free-to-play options or 1 copy of Battle Pass, R1, and I test with 5-star options, usually best in slot for a character, but sometimes I use their second best. I'll accept their second best in slot 5-star weapon, and that's generally how I test. I test a mix of both. Yoimiya, I just haven't been able to, she hasn't rerun for so long, so I haven't been able to get her Thundering Pulse, but next time I will, and hopefully she'll be better. Because I'm putting Dea above her. Dea has definitely gotten a resurgence in Fontaine. She is a comfort, because Fontaine has brought really strong DPSs. So supports that provide interruption resistance like Dea have a lot more value if you just have the raw power. Plus, her being Pyro is really good right now. It's good for Neuvillette. She's good for Arlecchino, Linny Mono Pyro, Arlecchino either Mono Pyro or Chevreuse. And then Clorand, also she's pretty good. Her advantage over Thoma, I was playing around with Sac Dea. Obviously I was using Sac Dea before as well, but just playing around with it more and just min-maxing Sac Dea a bit more for this list, and I was actually able to get some clears on Overload Dea that were faster than my Thoma. And the reason why is because Thoma actually extends Cloran's rotations if you wait for his burst in the later rotations, whereas Dea doesn't have to do that as much, since you can utilize Sacrificial Claymore, and as long as you can kill them in a certain amount of rotations and you get your sac procs, etc, etc. So because of all these things, Dea is actually kind of okay. On top of that, she can be a plunge carry for Xinyan teams. And when I say a plunge carry, I mean she's being carried by plunge, but hey, she still has it, and the fact that she can give you some extra interruption resistance while you're setting up sometimes can give you some nice quality of life. So overall, yeah, she's not insane, but she's kind of carried by some high tier characters, and she's all right for that. This tier list has finally made me test Mona. I got Mona a while ago, and I just got backed up testing other things, and I really underrated Mona. Very similar to Dea, Fontaine was the region of hyper carries. So the buffing that she gives, the Omen buff, is a really strong damage bonus. And I used her on Arlecchino teams, I used her on Neuvillette teams, and I used her on Cloran teams. And all three of these teams performed very well. Neuvillette probably the worst compared to his other options, but Arlecchino and Cloran really appreciated Mona's Omen buff and her Thrilling Tales, and I used her on teams that don't require VV. She's just buffing raw damage, and it was really good. I'll save the exact teams for my Mona guide, which I'll probably release at close to the beginning of Natlan, because I think that Mona is a bit underrated. I think Mona is all right. Now, again, this is tier 2. We've still got 3 tiers above this, right? I'm talking up these characters, but like, we've still got half the cast or more above, right? So just because I'm saying she's underrated doesn't mean I'm saying she's broken. You know, don't be all like look at the company, right? It's not like these characters are amazing, but I will gladly play Mona. I will gladly play Mona with those good carries. So yeah. Next is going to be Candace. I'm going to put Candace behind Mona and Dea just because she doesn't have as many teams. She's got Nilou and Arlecchino, but only Arlecchino sometimes, whereas Mona and Candace are more kind of universal. But Arlecchino Candace is kind of real. It's kind of real. It's not crazy insane, and you do need 6c6 Candace to make it work, but it's pretty not bad. And again, the damage bonus that she provides, the Hydro to Vape in AoE, allows her to be pretty good in AoE. I still don't like it as much as Sing Cho for Arlecchino, and now I'm even kind of liking Mona as well. But it's really nice that Candace at least has 2 playable teams now, one with Arlecchino, one with Nilou, and that is pretty darn cool. And the Arlecchino one actually utilizes her entire kit with the normal attack buffing and the Hydro application, so that's really cool. I'm happy to see Candace not be totally terrible. Next is Sayu. Like, I think Sayu's alright. Like, Sayu's a healer for Freminet. You can use her as budget Jean. Like, technically not that much worse than Jean, really, like if you think about it. Just not as much fanfare stacks for Farina. I kind of like on-field roly-poly Sayu for, once again, say it with me, Farina Bennett Xiangling. Really good. You can get some double swirls in there, buff both Farina and Xiangling's damage as your on-fielder and roll around, and pretty cool. Yeah, Sayu not too bad. If you want to put Sayu higher, I'm okay with it. I think maybe I will put Sayu higher than a few of these characters. Next is Shenhe. I'm gonna put her actually below. Oh god, I don't know where I want to put Shenhe. I'm gonna put her right below Sayu, I think. Maybe below Mona. I think Shenhe is really bad these days. She's only good on Ayaka Freeze, and Ayaka Freeze, okay, or Mono Cryo Ayaka, and if you're good, you can get some decent clears with Ayaka Mono Cryo or Ayaka Freeze or Ayaka Shenhe Bennett, but it's hard. It requires very good investment on your Ayaka, like very good investment. And the fact that that's her only team, and she basically got even shoved out of, out of Melt. Farina essentially just gives a bigger buff than Shenhe does without only buffing cryo characters, like with Farina giving her own off-field damage and Shenhe barely doing any. Ugh, it's honestly painful, guys. I'm really sad talking about Shenhe and Yoimiya. They've been done so dirty. I sure hope that somehow they can be redeemed. Yes, traditional Ayaka freeze is technically better than Farina Charlotte freeze, but for most people, I think most people will find them about the same, if not find the Farina one slightly better. Plus, if you're gonna put those pulls into another character, I don't like to consider constellations here, but like Shenhe has so little account value in terms of what she does. She's basically an Ayaka constellation because she's not good for any other character. So because of that, if you're considering Shenhe, it's not like a new character that opens up new playstyles. If you're just getting her for the power, and if you're gonna get her for the power, you might as well just get C1 Farina and play Farina Ayaka, and now that's way better than Shenhe. So I really I can't talk about this anymore. Lisa can support Alhaitham in spread with her defense reduction. Need a lot of ER for that, but it can be done. She can support Clorand with Thrilling Tales and defense reduction. Most of all, she can support Novelette by not providing too much ER, or not providing too much Electro Charge, and also giving that defense reduction and some damage. And she can be a decent-ish aggravate carry. So overall, Lisa, pretty all-right character. I think I'm still going to put Sayu ahead of Lisa. And I think I'm going to put Mona ahead of Lisa too. Maybe, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, Lisa pretty decent, especially for a starter character. Our General Goro, and we might as well just talk about Ito at the same time. I think Goro's definitely better than Ito because Goro's best team is actually with Noelle. So I guess it's going to be Ito next. Shiori just didn't do enough to make Ito's team good enough. His team, even with Chiori, still falls a bit behind. He's sort of a character that to really feel like a really good DPS with the other ones, he kind of needs, you know, his weapon and his C1 or 2, because his combos are really kind of hard to do. Like, honestly, I was surprised. Like, people kept telling me that Ito was like a super, you know, kind of mashy friendly character, but he's not, man. You have to, like, to get proper damage, you have to like actually know and play his combos, and it's actually kind of hard. And yeah, I don't know. I will throw a bit of a bone to the Ito mains out there and say that my Ito's artifacts are not crazy cracked. They're just around 200 crit value, whereas generally I like to have 210, 220 for my carries. So he's like a bit behind. I have compensated for that. Also was using R5 Serpent Spine, which is an absolute pain in the butt to test. I'll try and get his weapon on the rerun, on another rerun, but it's expensive, man, getting all these characters and all their weapons. God. But technically on paper, Serpent Spine should be pretty close. Most of the characters below him have him crowned. I crowned him, but it's still just doable. He can clear. It's fine. He's not awful, right? Hey, at least he's better than Yoimiya. He's better than Eula, but definitely not something I would recommend unless you really love Ito. Next is gonna be Dori. She got Aggravate. She got Farina stuff. I made a Dori guide pretty recently. Go check it out. But Dori Aggravate, Dori Farina. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. You could argue that she could be higher. I think maybe even she goes above Goro. I think Dori is all right. Kind of weird to play, kind of not super fun for me, but does some decent damage, has some teams. Doesn't always, you can do Aggravate or Farina or Hyper Bloom. Like, as memey as she is, she's got some stuff. She does need her C6. You don't build her if you don't have her C6. Next is going to be Sethos. Sethos, I've seen some clears, right? My Sethos guide, probably one of my worst guides, objectively speaking, in the sense that I just couldn't quite get the groove with actually playing him in the best way possible. Apparently, the best way to play him is not even to use his kit properly and just half charge his stuff and get tons of aggravates that way. And I did try and do that, obviously, after the video, but it's still just so it's so cringe, man. I don't like it. I was testing on an account that had C6 and I don't have access to that account anymore. So when I get his C6 again, I will do a retest him again. I'll relearn him again. But technically on paper, he could be higher, right? You could move him higher. You could maybe even move him into tier 1.5, but I think the fact that he's a charge shot bow user makes him very squishy and very susceptible to being knocked around, and it's like that quality of life and the kind of pain he is to play. Like maybe he goes here, but he gets a little asterisk that he's hard to play. But for now, I'm putting him here because he's also very inflexible. He only has aggravate. He really doesn't have anything else. You can do some like quick bloom stuff, but basically it's just aggravate and quick bloom. He doesn't have any supporting capabilities. That is Sethos. Next is Yanfei. She doesn't have the raw single target damage that Yoimiya does, so she loses to Yoimiya in raw single target. But what Yanfei does have is actual AoE, and with Freminet, she can vape in AoE, which is super awesome. She also has a shield, which she doesn't usually get every rotation because you have to build too much ER for it, but even if you get every other rotation, that's still like better than nothing. And having that interruption resistance is really nice. Yoimiya could never. And she also has plunge. I don't like, that's kind of whatever to me, but Yoimiya doesn't even have plunge. And yeah, with Freminet around, Freminet, Bennett, Kazuha, or double Hydro Bennett, Yanfei is a pretty good character. She's been buffed a lot. On top of that, she also has the shield. She also can play, you know, Thrilling Tales or, you know, Prototype Amber shield bot for various teams. So yeah, Yanfei actually pretty decent. Could maybe even be higher. Right now I have her at talent level 8 unascended. I'm, you know, by the time we do this tier list again, hopefully all of my that's the thing I'm working on right now. Most of my 4 stars are talent levels 8 unascended. Hopefully by the next tier list, they're all talent level 9 fully ascended, maybe even a lot of them level 90. And I'll really put them all through their paces again. And maybe, hey, maybe she even moves up to 1.5. We'll see. Next is going to be Layla. I like Layla for Mono Cryo. I like Layla for Wanderer. She does actually pretty good damage in Mono Cryo. You give her Harbinger of Dawn with Shenhe. It's actually pretty good. But Wanderer is obviously a better team, giving that crit rate buff, giving a bit of buffing at C4. And her best team, of course, being Novelette, especially if you don't have Zhongli. You want some interruption resistance, you've got C0 Novelette. She's a great partner for him. Just a generally strong shielder, strong character. Pretty good. Like, not insane, because, like, her buffing is not insane, but pretty good character. One of the better defensive characters overall. Shielder's not in the greatest spot right now. Hopefully she sees some more use soon. Yeah, Layla pretty good. Next is going to be Beidou. In the right circumstance, as in 2 targets, she may be even tier 1.5, tier 1 kind of character. But in the majority of situations, I just don't find myself using Beidou because it's just not worth building a character that's only good for limited scenarios, in my opinion. But she's good for aggravate. She's good for overload, for some interruption resistance. She's got her interruption resistance, provides damage reduction, provides that bit of shield. She does some solid damage. Like, she's a good character, right? Good character. I just think she's too inconsistent against the different enemy types in the game that she belongs here. But good character overall. Next is going to be Keqing. Keqing is an aggravate carry, and you can do like a quick bloom thing with Freminet, as of course you always can. But I still like her for aggravate. I like her quick swappy playstyle. She's been power crept by, you know, Yaimiko in terms of raw power, although she still had some AoE advantages, but now she's really been power crept by Chlorand. Overall though, like, the raw scalings for Keqing are not like crazy high. She's mostly carried by Fischl on aggravate teams, but I still like her. I still think she's pretty good, especially in AoE where she does more carrying, right? Where in AoE, her burst actually has a pretty big AoE, especially if you group up the enemies with Kazuha. Fischl doesn't have AoE, right? So she kind of needs someone like Keqing to do that AoE damage. But in single target, you know, Keqing's just raw damage just isn't that high. She doesn't have EM scaling, but she's still fine. She's still Electro Driver character. There's just other better things. Next is Noelle. Freminet gave this character new life, 100%. Noelle, Freminet, Goro, Noelle, Double Hydro, Kazuha. Probably give her Archaic Petra in that set just as like a total buffer, or do the spin to win action with Freminet, Goro, Flex for AoE. Pretty decent. Some people like to play with Navia. I don't like it very much. Definitely requires very high investment. You really do want to go for that 5-star weapon if you really want her to do like really good damage. And you want C6 Goro, and they don't tend to run together, which is a pain in the butt. But if you can get all the pieces, if you can assemble the Noelle Exodia, then she's actually pretty decent. Tighnari, the second to last character in tier 2. Tighnari has the same drawback as Yoimiya in that he's very single target locked. However, he has the pro of doing more damage and taking less field time. So yeah, he's the better character. I still can't, the damage he does definitely justifies him being in a higher tier, but the fact that it's locked to single target keeps him in tier 2 for me. I realized I missed someone. Dendro Traveller. I actually put Dendro Traveller down here, and I think I agree with myself on that. Basically relegated to Nilou or aggravate teams now. And that's healerless aggravate teams, which would be basically just Chlorand variants. I kind of want to put Dendro Traveller a bit lower. Yeah, I'm going to put him down here just because the buffing, like, there isn't crazy buffing. It's not crazy character. And I'm going to put Kaveh because at C6, she actually at least gives some buffing. She can hold elegy for the end, which means she is still best in slot in Nilou teams after all this time. And there are some other Dendro teams. Kaveh at C6 actually has enough Dendro application that it's the only Hyper Bloom team that I would even come close to telling someone to try out. It's still not great compared to Nahida, but it's like the only functional one. Like she applies, if you have Sacrificial Bow, her burst, she applies an okay amount of Dendro that you can actually get some Hyper Blooms going, but mostly she's basically just a best in slot for Nilou character, and Nilou's pretty good, so she goes in tier 2. Kujou Sara has definitely had a resurgence with Raiden, Chlorand, Chevreuse teams, and Chlorand teams in general make Kujou Sara better than she was. Part of me does want to put her in tier 1.5, but just the fact that Fischl is generally preferred in both of those teams, not quite as much as the Raiden one, but the Raiden one isn't quite as good. I mean, I kind of want her, I don't know, maybe by the next tier list, I'll have put her in tier 1.5, but regardless, she's pretty good on both of those teams, and both of those teams are quite good. But yeah, that is mid-tier and low tiers. Let me know what you disagree with, and make sure you subscribe for the next tier list video, which is coming out either tomorrow or the next day. Take care. Bye for now.